everybody. So this is really exciting. We are here. We're back. Sorry for the delay. Summer's just tricky and busy and everything like that. But we are here to do a special Chicks on Flicks podcast. We're going to be looking at the anime film A Silent Voice. And Christine is here, and I say hi.
Hi.
Had a good summer.
Yes, it's been crazy busy. So
I understand.
Yeah.
I had D23, and it took me a while to even just sort of recover from that and just busyness. So, but I'm really excited that we can be here to discuss this film. This has been a really rough year for animation. Last year was so good. I was so spoiled because there were so many great movies last year. And, some people debate, was Your Name last year? Was it this year? Depending on how you look at it. But that was, of course, really, really special. And you had Kubo and the Two Strings and Finding Dory and Moana and just so many great movies. And this year, Zootopia, it's just not as good. Let's just put it that way. And so I saw this movie and it really moved me, and I thought it had a lot of things to talk about. And so I thought that you having an anime background, familiarity with it, that you'd be the perfect person to talk about it. So we're taking a break from the Ebert cast and we are doing this anime. So this movie is directed by a woman, actually, which I think is really cool. Her name is Naoko Yamada. That's her name. It's based on the manga of the same name, which I guess is really good. I haven't read the manga, but what do you think of this movie? Your just sort of overall base response.
Well, first off, I'm so glad that you thought of me to talk about this with, because when I was watching it, I was like, I'm so happy that I have been recommended this movie.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to pick like one word, I would say that this movie is very unique.
Yeah.
I have not seen anything like this movie. It is really unique. Whether uniqueness is like a good thing or a bad thing, I mean, I don't know. I loved this movie. Mm-hmm. I really, really liked it. But there is so much to just think and talk about. So I'm glad that you kind of prepared some topics and things, because there's a lot to process.
Yeah. It's not a masterpiece like Your Name is. I mean, those don't come along very often. It has its flaws. I mean, Your Name does too, I guess. But it's not as good as Your Name, but I don't think it has to be. I think it's a really ambitious, interesting film. And it is. So we'll talk about some of the things we liked, some of the things we didn't like. But the basic story behind this movie, without any major spoilers, I guess we might talk some spoilers, but the basic idea is that you have this boy who is the lead character named Ishida. Shoya Ishida is his name. And he is not a happy kid, not a nice kid. And when he's an elementary school kid, there's a new girl in his class, Nishima, and sorry if I'm saying these wrong, but anyway, comes in and she's a deaf girl, and he takes this as a challenge, I guess, and he's very annoyed by her, and he starts to bully her really bad, really, really bad, and it kind of escalates, and he ends up getting expelled from school. And the most of the movie is him as an older teen trying to kind of make recompense for what he's done and trying to deal with it, and her trying to accept what he's done as well. So you kind of get both sides, and it's really unique as a narrative, a bully narrative, to be sort of told from the bully's perspective, and to not have it be, I didn't feel like, at least sort of placating his or excusing his behavior at all. So what do you think of that overall sort of story, the base story?
Oh, well, honestly, this is I think, an incredibly useful kind of story, because I think it takes a very brave writer to write from the perspective of the one who has done the wrong. And I appreciated how they never tried to show that Shoya's bullying came from his own deep, dark pain.
Right.
And they never excused it. They never even made it seem like what he did wasn't so bad. It was awful. Like,
Yeah.
when I was first watching it, and, and they have the montage with the hearing aids, I was so, like, it made me so emotional. Like, it made me so angry. You're just flabbergasted, really, that you would have a protagonist who's being presented in such an unforgiving light.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing,
yeah, and it's really tough. They definitely don't sugarcoat it at all, and I also thought it was very true, I guess, how the teacher just is completely a enabler, I guess, I think, of the behavior. Like, doesn't do anything really to stop it. And he, he knows what all this is going on. And I really related to that because I had a similar experience when I was in 5th grade, where I was bullied pretty badly. And my parents went into the teacher, and she was just basically like, boys will be boys, kind of her attitude, like, we can't really do anything. Sorry, and so my parents were like, well, screw that. I get out of your school. And thankfully. And so that's part of the reason why I'm such a, pro school choice advocate, was because it really did help me so much. But anyway, I definitely related very much to this whole story, because the way that Nishimiya, sorry, Nishimiya, the way that she just kind of sat there, like her sort of attitude, I felt like that was very true as well, of like and then when she finally does explode and let it all out, and I don't know, I just felt like it was very true.
Yeah, I think she was just so hurt. I was going to say that the reason I think this kind of story is so useful to have around is because the forgiveness arc we've seen a million times. The forgiveness arc is very black and white for someone to look at their past and be like, I need to find forgiveness in myself for someone, or come to terms with something that someone else has done to me. And I think that this kind of arc is so much more complicated. And I loved how people kept calling Shoya out for doing it for himself. They're like, you just want to feel better about yourself. You're doing this for you. That's not a true apology. Like, that's not, making things right. And the absolute struggle and like, okay, well then, and how can you get out of your own head and not make it about you when you're still there, you're trapped, it is about you because you're in your head. I just thought that was just so.
That's really true. And I think that might have seemed more cloying if the change didn't feel authentic and real, and it did to me. And it felt like this is a different person than we saw at the beginning of the movie. And I think what also made it work is that it's not just that he's like sort of trying to find forgiveness, it's that he's just so lonely. That he's the two kind of have this weird bond because of their shared loneliness. And I thought that was a beautiful message of the movie. It's sort of that human connection that loneliness can oddly give us, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and there's and bullying is a form of abuse, right? Well, abuse is not, there's no positive bond. It is very intimate. And I think there was a really interesting video on the internet a little while ago where people would slap random strangers, like two people were put together and you had permission to slap them. And a couple people commented like, that that felt really intimate. And so there
Interesting.
is
Yeah.
this, I think there is this very, very weird bond with some people, and some people have to work all their lives to, like break that and free themselves from it. And then some people are going to have to come to terms or understand it. Like how you react to that bond that's really imposed on you by another person. And that's why it's abuse, is that person chooses you and then creates this connection you never really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
really
that's an interesting
complicated.
point. I mean, it's a little bit different because you're dealing with children a little, like
Yeah,
he's not an adult when
right.
he makes these foolish choices. But yeah, I that's a really interesting point. Yeah, that there is something kind of oddly intimate about these kinds of intense experiences that you go through. And I just felt like I don't know, maybe it's going to sound lame, but I think you can kind of tell that this was directed by a woman, because
Mm.
there's just a certain uh I don't know, like a degree uh of of love and softness, and maybe that's to use cliches, but I don't know, I just feel like you can kind of just tell that this isn't directed by the typical Japanese sort of male
Hmm.
narrative kind of
Hmm.
voice, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that points me to agree with you is I was just I just learned this new word a couple weeks ago called bathos. Have you ever heard of this word?
No.
I learned it from a YouTube video, and it was talking about how people will feel uncomfortable with dramatic, passionate storytelling. And so the storyteller will create humor or comedy to lighten the mood, and they'll essentially kill the drama. It's kind of like the whole problem with Hunchback of Notre Dame is it's
Oh, right,
constant
right, right. Yeah.
pathos. And I think that women, directors and writers in general, are more comfortable with those uh, deep emotions and just letting them sit there on screen
Mm,
without any interruption at all. And this movie did that constantly. And I didn't think that they made things melodramatic except for one time.
yeah.
There was one where I was like, I was like, I got a little ridiculous. But other than that one moment, and I don't know if we're like talking spoilers. Should I
Yeah,
say?
let's just do it. Let's just,
Okay.
well, I'll put a
So
warning.
yeah, we'll put up a little warning. But it was when Shoya woke up in the hospital and he took off all of his hookups and
Oh,
then
yeah.
like ran out of the hospital in his hospital gown. And I was like, okay, that's like, it was just a bit much. But it was really only that one moment that I felt like we had crossed into melodrama. Everything other than
Yeah.
that I felt was just very heartfelt and in place and realistic.
Yeah, I can see that it does get a little over the top in a few moments. But you are dealing with some pretty uh, it'd be easy to sort of go off that bridge even more. So it's kind of amazing there aren't more moments like that when you're dealing with things as dramatic as suicide and stuff like that. It does handle tone pretty well. But yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you there. Um, what do you think of this whole idea of the social anxiety, the way it's handled in the movie, and this idea of the X's over the faces? What did you think of that?
Oh my gosh, I loved it. I loved it so much. Um,
Because here's
so
the
I,
interesting. Oh, sorry. Go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, the interesting thing is that he goes from Ishida goes from being the bully to being the outcast.
Right.
That like society sort of says what you did was wrong, and we're going to punish you for it. And then he develops the social anxiety, which is really interesting on a lot of levels. And so if those who haven't seen the movie, everybody that's around him, he has a blue X over their faces because he can't make eye contact with them because he's so messed up.
Hmm.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I thought it was such a beautiful story of, bullying the bully and
Mhm.
what that really accomplishes. Because on the faces, it was, and his whole social anxiety situation and everything, and
Yeah.
how it's really more of an emotional social anxiety than a, biological one.
Mm.
Um, and that
Yeah, that's
it's
interesting.
self-caused. Um,
Yeah, because Nishima is more biological, like you're saying. Like it's more because of she has more of a biological reason for there being a difference between her and the other people. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah,
have
for
put it
sure.
that way, but that's very true.
Yeah. And I don't know. I was just thinking about,
You were saying about bullying the bully.
yeah, like on Twitter today, you see constant dogpiling and shaming of bullies. And I just think that it's really not the solution. And I thought that this was just a really beautiful way of showing that. Um, and I
Yeah, it's a tricky balance because you don't want to appease them, you don't want to excuse the behavior in any way, but you're just kind of creating a school shooter at a certain point. Like
mm,
you have to just be careful when I don't know, you just have to treat people like human beings and I don't know the way we just everybody like it's one thing that's what makes education policy and some of things so hard is because you're trying to create something for this huge mass group of people and each person has their own individual weird unique story that has all these facets and things
mhm.
like that and so that you just have to look at the person and try to not I don't know just look at it as a unique situation.
Yeah, it is so complicated. And that's kind of what I appreciated about this movie was that it didn't give you a whole lot of black and white. This is what people should do. This is what people shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Here are all the solutions and everything. I thought it was interesting too because, um, spending a little bit of time in Japan taught me a lot about the completely different paradigms, that some people will think with. And, suicide is a major issue in Japan, and so is
Oh,
bullying.
I didn't know
Um,
that.
yeah, Japan has some of the highest suicide rates for a first world country. Um, it's horrendously out of control. And bullying is really, really bad. But a lot of it comes from this mindset that on one hand is really positive because you get a lot of self-sufficiency, you get good education and success, people who are creative business people, and a lot of really great like driven things. But on the other hand, you get this attitude that is very survival of the fittest, and there are a lot of Japanese parents that will excuse bullying because it's kind of a tried and true tradition in Japan.
Mm.
They see it as a way of weeding out the weak. They see it as a very natural and normal thing that children do, that they're going to create their own hierarchical orders amongst each other. But then there's kind of this modern wave of Japanese people who are fighting tooth and nail against that mentality. And
Mm.
so there's this massive cultural clash right now happening in Japan with their children, because you have all these parents who are like, my child just has a lot of energy. They're a very powerful child. They're a natural leader. And this is how they've got to figure out what to do with that energy. And then you have these other parents who are like, yeah, but like my kid is coming home from school every day with a bloody nose and a black eye. Like,
Yeah, don't put your energy on my kid.
yeah. So, but I mean, I even had a friend whose son was the same age as my son. They were both 2 at the time, and they would play. And she was like, my son was born in the year of the dragon. Like, he's a very powerful kid. He's a lot of energy. Like, she would say this stuff. And he would just hit my son constantly, all the time. Like, we would go over, and she and I got along, but her son would hit my son until my son was hiding underneath the couch every time we went there. And um, we kind of talked about it with each other, and she said, your son is very sensitive, isn't he? And I'm like, well, anybody's sensitive if you hit him in the face enough times. Like, what is this? And then another time, like, her son hit my son in the face, and she grabs her son and hits him across the face and says, don't hit! Except in Japanese. But,
Yeah.
damn it! So, it's like, so seeing this
That's
kind of
interesting.
show, yeah,
Yeah.
like with that context,
Yeah.
where there's a struggle in Japan to understand this kind of thing, this kind of bullying behavior. They don't have the same attitude that we have right now in the States, where, we're just so adamant that like bullies are the worst and like get rid of all of them, like they're terrible. I don't know. It just
well, it took us a while to get there. It took us a while to get to this point.
For sure.
I think, for sure. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And it kind of makes you think about his mother in the movie a little bit differently, given that context then, because she never makes excuses for her son, which I really love. I love her personality. When even the great scene when she burns the money, I love that scene.
So good.
That's so good. She's just like, you are not going to commit suicide ever again. I will burn this money. And I don't know. I thought that was great. That he is the kind of character that sort of needs a slap in the face in a way, like needs somebody to, like, there is a point where sometimes you can almost have too much introspection, almost too much, and I felt like that was just sort of a wake-up call, I guess. It was a really great moment. She was a fun character, I thought.
Yeah, I agree.
Single mom, kind of a thing. This would just sort of peel off, just so ever so slowly, and then we do get the ending when there's sort of a mass, like they all fall off, and it's like, yes.
Yeah.
It's really good, really cool.
There's an element that reminds me of, have you ever seen or read The Kite Runner? And the subline is, can you be good again? How can you be good again? I think it's similar to that.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
The main character is someone who has done something terribly wrong in his childhood and then has to grow up and figure it the heck out.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought, but yeah, you're right. That they are I love that book. The movie, I don't think is as successful as the book, but that's probably a tall order because I love that book. It's brutal. It's really hard to read, but it is one of my favorite books of the last whatever period. I forget when it was actually written, but anyway, yeah, that's really true. And that he's almost, it's interesting too because that involves a certain degree of like honesty, whereas at least with Ishida, he's always kind of honest about what he's doing, and he's always and you get even the impression that he's sort of attracted to Nishima from the beginning, and that's part of that's certainly not an excuse at all, but that is, I think, part of the reason why he does what he does, is because I think he is sort of attracted to her.
Well, and I think that I felt like there was a big element of Shoya being afraid of the other bullies. It's like he knew that as soon as he lost his station, he would become the bullied. Yeah. And I think you kind of sensed that from all of them, that they were afraid of the others turning on them. So yeah, that's true. Yeah, there definitely was sort of a peer pressure kind of dynamic going on. That's very true. Yeah, sort of feel like we've covered a lot of the really strong things. I had just the change in him feels authentic. I really liked him as a high schooler. I really liked him as I mean, not liked him, but like I liked his character. He was a very well-rounded, interesting character to me, and yeah, and I just felt like it was a very emotionally true movie. And then my other, I just think the animation is just beautiful. I love the way that it uses nature. That you'll particularly with Nishima, you see flowers with her a lot, and there's just sort of a feeling of peace and calm with her, and watching it subtitled, because they can't really subtitle what she's saying, but you get what she's saying, what she's trying to say, and it was just so, the character design, we'll talk a little bit more about that, isn't that great, but like just the backgrounds and the way you use light and nature and the animation, I just thought was beautiful. Yeah. And then I also love the music.
I think the score is just so
Yeah.
pretty.
Yeah. Well, and the sound in general for this
Yes.
movie, there was so much attention paid.
Yeah. And I was talking with my friend that that a lot of, particularly a lot of animation, the scores are just very flat, very bland, unless it's like a flat out musical like Moana. And so that's one thing that anime totally has, I think, better than Western animation, is just this beautiful instrumentals and accompaniment and everything. So, and the sound design, like you say, is, whether it's the Studio Ghibli film or Your Name or whatever, the sound design is always so good. So good. So I really liked that. And so let's talk about some of the things maybe we didn't like as much.
Okay.
It is a long movie. That's probably its biggest downside. It's 2 hours and 10 minutes, a long movie. I think that for that reason, it's going to be a bit of a tough sell for people that either don't like anime or struggle with anime or, whatever. This would definitely not be one that I would suggest as a starting point. At least 15 minutes, I think, shaved off and not really missed that much.
If not an hour. Because I remember I was like, this movie's probably almost over. And I looked at it, 40 minutes left. And I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, that's fair. It's too long for sure. A half hour I could easily have taken out. So that is a downside to it for sure, no doubt. And that just makes the whole pacing seem kind of languid at times. And it can be a little repetitive because they do kind of do this certain scenes several times. Like they have several suicide sort of scenes, and they have several, like bowling scenes, and we kind of, it's like we got it. We get the idea. So yeah. What is something that you had as a downside? Was that the main thing, was the pacing?
No, and it didn't really bother me. Like I was surprised at how long it was, but it didn't bother me. I actually felt like this would be a good introduction for people who don't normally watch anime.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Just because like I have a friend, so my best friend, Chris, she doesn't watch anime at all. And I have been on her to watch Your Name. I'm like, I'm gonna watch Your Name. This one, I was like, I would also show her this one because she just loves things with this kind of emotional depth. Which is what I think a lot of people don't think anime has to offer, and so therefore they don't watch it because of the way that the kind of the stereotypes. So biggest negative to me, there was one thing that kind of bothered me. I understand Nishimiya being a victim and kind of being trampled. But I do feel like she fell into the stereotype of the angelic disabled person who is just so forgiving constantly and so loving that her purpose is to help other people learn to love themselves. I think that was my least favorite thing.
I can see a little bit about that. Yeah. I mean, she does finally have her moment where she just loses it and just clobbers him, which is a really satisfying moment because she has been pretty, I can see that. I think there's truth.
So I didn't hate it. I didn't feel like she was totally flat. Like she fit that stereotype in every way for sure. And the fact that she has her own frustrations and her
a downside. And there could be sometimes a little bit of confusion. I really liked what they did with Nishimiya's vocals, the way they did that, but it could be a little confusing at times of what she was trying to say or what was going on. But I kind of liked that, so it was a good and a bad, I guess. Mostly good. But anyway, so that's really all. It's just the main flaw is just the pacing, and that will be a deal breaker to some, but for me it wouldn't. And so I was glad that it wasn't for you to hear that. So yeah, I'm glad that you overall enjoyed it. It's one I could just picture some people thinking this is boring and other people really liking it. So I'm glad you liked it.
Well, and I think I went with her speech. I actually really, really appreciated that about the movie because I think that they were trying to make a point. Most people who are deaf are not completely deaf. And,
Mm-hmm.
The odds are that they'll have a hearing aid. The odds are is that they'll have some speech ability, but they might avoid talking because of the reaction they're going to get from people.
Mm-hmm.
They might feel more comfortable doing that around people they know better, which she does. And I thought that was just so well represented, that someone had actually done their homework, someone had actually done their research. And there were a couple of moments where I thought that her speech really was a treasure in the movie. One being, oh my gosh, when they're fighting and she just repeats over, "I'm doing my best."
Mm-hmm.
And at first you don't even know what she's saying, and neither does he. But then as she repeats it, you understand it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. Yeah. I just was dying. It was so good. And then when she tries to tell him ski or skides, like, "I like you," and he thinks she's saying Tsuki, the moon.
Oh yeah.
Similar, but then I loved how she goes home and she plants her face in her bed and she's just kicking her legs and everything. Just like the physicality of this movie felt so real to me, where she's just so frustrated and so embarrassed that he misunderstood this huge moment, and even when, her little sister Yuzu, which, by the way, Yuzu is this Japanese citrus fruit. And so it was a really cute nickname for the sister. And even Yuzu's like, "Oh, you told him you like him?" Like, it's exciting, right? She's about to be happy. And then she's like, he didn't understand what I said. And just how devastating that would be. And what an awful, reminder of her limitations. I really felt for her. So I loved how they did that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And she just was, it was just a really honest, true, authentic movie that I thought, I don't know, it just, like I said, particularly this year, where just so many of the animated films have like fallen flat. And maybe it was also partly I'd seen the Emoji movie this week. I was like, oh, yes, yay. Oh, this is so great. But I think it genuinely, even outside of that, it is a good film. And there's just something raw and emotional, and they took risks and they tried things, as opposed to just sort of this corporate filmmaking that we see, which sometimes can be enjoyable. But I don't know, there was just something that I really bonded with emotionally with the film.
Yeah.
And once a movie can do that, you can forgive a lot. I mean, that's what I've said constantly about Wonder Woman, is that I'm totally aware of its flaws, and I'm totally aware that it has wonky CGI and it has some other things that aren't perfect, but I don't care, because I emotionally bonded with the character. I emotionally was invested in her story and what she was going through. And so that's kind of how I feel about this and many other films, is that they managed to be emotionally true and tell a story that I feel for and I can relate to, especially this one as somebody who was bullied as a child. It was something that I really I felt like it could have been cloying and it could have been sentimental, but in my opinion, it felt true.
Absolutely. I think that, art happens on the edge, and this was a daring movie.
Right.
And if you're going to be, taking risks, some of them are going to pay off. And then every once in a while, your foot's going to slip over the edge, and you might get a little bit too much on either side. But
that's exactly right.
It doesn't play it safe. So this movie is naturally going to have flaws. And I think that that's totally acceptable. I'm not sure where, our society ever got it in their heads that, like, you can't like a movie that has some flaws in it.
Yeah.
Really not sure, because all the best ones do.
Yeah. I think that's a great, I like that. Art, it plays on the edge. That's really good. Very good. And for the record, Makoto Shinkai, the director of Your Name, came out and said that he absolutely loved this movie and that he thought it was good. So, and they're competing in Japan in the box office at the time. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think they had some similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, cool. So if you had to give it a score from 1 to 10, what would you give it?
I think for what it set out to be, what it is, and like how confident I would feel showing it to another person, I'd give it a 10 out of 10. I thought it was great.
Nice. Yeah, I'd probably give it, just because of the pacing issue, I'd probably give it a 9. That's a really strong score. It's
Yeah.
one of
Well,
my
I mean,
favorites of the year.
because I think Your Name is a 10 out of 10. So if I compared it to that, then I'd have
Yeah,
to knock it down. But I don't know,
exactly.
in its own element.
Yeah, I've seen almost 70 movies this year, and this is my 4th favorite. So
Mhm.
that's pretty high praise.
Yeah.
Yeah, praise. So, all right. Well, great. Well, thanks so much for joining me. And make sure you guys are following us on Chicks on Flicks on Twitter. We'll try to be more active on that in the next, next little bit. And let us know if you get to see a silent voice. And it's called, what's the name in Japanese? It's Ko no Katachi is the name. And sometimes it's just called The Shape of Voice.
That's what
Depending
mine
on,
was
I guess.
titled when I watched it.
Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
So The Shape of Voice, a silent voice, Kono Katachi is the Japanese. If you get a chance to see it, or if you have read the manga or whatever, put in the comments section. Let us know what you think of it, and where you're at on it. And that would be great. We'd love to hear. And where can people find you, Christine?
They can find me. I'm doing Instagram the most these days. So
Yeah.
my family account is the letter C Tyler Insta. And then my book account, or like stories and things like that, is C Tyler Books. So.
Okay, great. Well, I'll have a link to that in the description. And yeah, like I said, follow us on Chicks on Flick. And you can find me at Smiling LDS Girl on social media. And we're going to have a fun podcast this Saturday. My friend AJ is joining me. We're going to start a new sort of hidden gems series that we're going to do. It's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to be talking about Follow That Bird, which is the Big Bird movie, which is awesome. So it's going to be really fun. So look forward to that. I just posted my review of The Dark Tower last night. It was just not a good film. And so hopefully enjoy that. And yeah, we'll be back again sometime hopefully next week. We'll see how things go. Summer's a bit challenging, so we'll let you know if you follow us on Twitter when our next broadcast will be. So thanks again.
Yeah.
And we will talk again soon.